Bon dia, Vacordia. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And as is customary, I start with a prayer for peace. Gamara Siakon ar fud na crinne. Gamara Siakon in our jaili agus in our jirha. Ganari lin lena cuid garmacha, gam which buicus jeev, je chivdaka is spirit chivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see, through our fear of each other, a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into ploughshares, and to no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the holy mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me see where people are from. Chile, Hampshire. Well, it's cold in Ireland, but it's been dry. I've been walking in the woods just before this. Beautiful clear sky and that fresh spring air. It's been lovely. So wet, chilly, damp and chilly Hertfordshire. Beautiful Wyoming. Hi, Liz. Wait, let me see where people are from. Chicago, lovely. Finally warming up there. That's great to see it. Sunny Gisborne in New Zealand. Scotland, Ulster, chilly Maryland, deepest, darkest Elmer's End, Warwickshire. North Germany, Oxfordshire, beautiful. Lovely to see you all. New York and South Wales. So we are going, Aberdeenshire, and from Berlin. You're all so welcome. Today we are going to the UK. And somebody from Norway waiting for spring, bless you. But we are going to Plymouth in South Devon. And my guest tonight is John Nash. John, you are so welcome.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. Hi, everybody.
So we've got people from Canada, the Canadian Prairies, Sydney, Australia. They're up early. And Bristol and the Netherlands. So what's it like where you are right now? What's the weather like?
It's been cold today. We've had a good kind of combination of bright sun, but chilly weather. I was ready for summer. I was ready to move into that space, ready with the spring equinox coming up, but instead was woolly hat, scarf, heating on. So it's been a bit of a cool one at the moment. So yeah, like a lot of people.
So tell us about Plymouth. I have never been there. Are you from there?
I keep telling people that I've just moved to Plymouth, but I've been here about 14 years now, I think. So I don't think I'm allowed to make that claim anymore. I keep ending up back in Devon. I was born here a very long time ago in North Devon, when my parents lived there. And then we moved to Sussex briefly. And then I grew up in Wiltshire, so sort of in Salisbury, Stonehenge neck of the woods.
Oh, lovely.
And then keep ending up back in Devon. I was a student here and then came to live with my other half here in Plymouth. So yeah, I think 13, 14 years, I'm sort of, I'm not new to the city anymore. And it's it's a cool place to be because you're at the bottom of Dartmoor. So you can go like half an hour up here and be out on the moorland in a stone circle there. You can go, 5 minutes this way and be in the sea, be in the ocean, and then you can go slightly this way and you can be in Cornwall. You can go slightly this way and be on the rest of the sort of the south coast path. So yeah, it's kind of
you're in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it's sort of beautiful in terms of what's right on your doorstep.
Oh, brilliant.
As well as sort of being in a city that's got its own kind of things going on.
And there's a port there because people left from Plymouth to go to the US. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. So Plymouth in lots of ways has been, because there was kind of originally like a little natural harbour here, what's now kind of known as the Barbican area, and then that's sort of more broadly in the Sound, which is now a marine park preserved piece of environment, which is extraordinary, and they're doing all kinds of like extraordinary conservation things. But that's because there's this kind of natural level of protection from the sea. So it's been a port town since, I don't know, possibly the Roman period onwards, and then across time, people going out to the States from here. The Mayflower to America sort of accidentally left from Plymouth because it broke down and then was in Southampton and then broke down and was here.
Okay. So it was meant to leave straight from Southampton to go.
From further around. I can't remember exactly where. It broke down, ended up in Southampton, got fixed up, lost one ship, moved on. And it's, and there's lots of interesting, difficult things about the Mayflower story, right? And what that's the start of a process of. But Plymouth sort of was quite keen to do what originally they were going to call a celebration, and then sort of rightly, I think, changed to being a commemoration of that. But none of the people on the boat were from Plymouth, and it was only here because it kind of was in for repairs. It was in the garage, for want of a better word. But so there's the Mayflower steps, and they sort of have done bits and pieces of that. But people there was a big emigration depot for people going out to Australia from here, and then the Navy, because it's sort of historically been like a fortified, defended area in the same way.
Is the harbour deep?
The harbour-ish, and then as you sort of have the little harbour run, and then you go out to the Sound, which is deeper, and is sort of again protected from the sea because they've built like an artificial like breakwater across the entrance sort of into the sort of the bigger cove, and so you get ships and nuclear submarines and all kinds of interesting things going through there. But it's now a protected marine park, and there's lots of interesting stuff going on about conserving the species that are there and replanting seagrass and all kinds of things.
I'd love to visit sometime. I've been to Falmouth, which is
beautiful,
and that was where all the packet steamers, the mail steamers, left all over the world, and I've seen the map. It was incredible, and it's the third deepest harbour in the world.
Oh, wow.
The deepest is Sydney, and the second deepest is Cove in Cork.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
And Cove was where the Titanic left. All the ships, people going in famine ships going from Cove to the US.
It just means you get these extraordinary kind of connections, don't you, around the world. I always, and again in Plymouth, sometimes that's for good or for ill. But I think Plymouth today sometimes can feel a bit like it's at the bottom of the country. It feels a bit kind of forgotten sometimes, I think. But had this incredible link to everywhere all around the world, out to Newfoundland, down to Australia, out around and people coming in as well from all over the world. It's kind of there's a longer history of kind of diversity of all kinds, even though perhaps in Plymouth today you might go, oh, is that the case? Is it a particularly
because Hannah says, is this where the connection of the Plymouth Brethren comes from then, the people on the Mayflower?
So I don't think it's from the people on the Mayflower, but the Plymouth Brethren sect began here, and still has a number of branches. I don't know how kind of active or sort of popular they are, but so there's that kind of connection. I guess because of the influence of that journey, that idea of a wide number of kind of like religions or different takes and flavors of Christianity have sort of prospered in the city.
So the Plymouth Brethren, they didn't go on the Mayflower?
No, I think that they're see now I'm starting to doubt my self. I have a Mayflower book over there which I could check from, but I think Plymouth Brethren are slightly later, albeit like inspired by the same kind of Puritan kind of, I don't know, straight edge Protestantism kind of vibe.
Okay. Oh, fascinating. So, and Pat Booker wasn't Crowley. She's talking about Alistair Crowley, I think. Crowley. Plymouth Brethren in his upbringing, I think he was.
I think his mum was very, I think that might explain lots of decisions and things he wanted to do to upset that later on. But yeah, I think his mum particularly was very, very Plymouth Brethren. But I don't think there's ever I don't think we have a Plymouth Crowley connection.
Yes, and Andrew Anderson says, weirdly, I've been to the other Plymouth in Massachusetts, but not the one in England. That's our Andrew.
And Andrew, my friend, you are welcome anytime. Please come, and then I will come and bother you in Stratford. That's a good exchange deal, I think.
Oh, indeed, absolutely. So, yes, Pat says that she called him, this is the mother, Alistair, the Beast, as a child. Interesting.
Yeah, be careful what you say to your children, parents. Be careful what you say.
Indeed, talk about fulfilling a prophecy. Well, maybe he's not the Beast. I don't know, but anyway. But and a beast can be anywhere. A beast can be a beautiful animal. It's not about the beast. It could be a beast. So anyway, so what is it in Plymouth or in the area where you live that you connect with most as a Druid? Is there a space or a place that calls to you?
So I think the sea is a big kind of draw, and I think when I was living up in Wiltshire, my kind of paganism and druidry would have been really, a landscape that's full of stone circles and burial mounds and trees and things. And I guess, one of the things that's shifted a little bit in that is that you have this sort of incredible presence of the ocean. And there are you can sort of go for the sort of the mainstream front of the city, but there are also lots of beautiful little beaches, especially if you can find the ones that people don't really know about a little bit one way or a little bit down to Cornwall. There's just something about that vast expanse and the kind of the power of that I think is pretty incredible. But also, it is a landscape where, as often the case in this sort of part of the country, you can't go that far without eventually tripping over a stone circle somewhere. And again, there are some more sort of famous or better known ones out on Dartmoor. Just across the river in Cornwall, near Looe, there's a beautiful little circle called Julo that's 5 standing stones. 5 now, I think. I'm not sure if it's always been 5. But they're like a white quartz kind of stone. It's really unusual. And it's, it's tiny. It's in the sort of side of a little sheep field, and the sheep look very curious at you if you traipse out there in robes and things. But it's a beautiful little kind of hidden space. So we're lucky that there are a few kind of sites like that around that have something going on for sure.
Are you a sea druid or a land druid? I mean, it's just an interesting question when you're so close to the sea. Like, I'm a tree person rather than a stone circle one. But not that I'm against those monuments. It's just where I feel most at home is in the woods. Yeah. So,
I think the woods are still for me the place, and for a city, I'm relatively lucky that there are quite a few green spaces and bits of woodland. There's a beautiful little wood called Ham Woods with a river running through it, or a brook. That's about half an hour from here. That is brilliant. You've got Plimbridge Woods up by the River Plym. So I think that's the traditional branded thing, isn't it? I still probably am the same. I'm still probably happiest out in the woods. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that the sea has its own kind of richness and definitely it's like power. I don't know. It does things to my brain that I can't put into words really. But it's odd that there's less. Like there are probably more books and rituals and things that are about, trees and woodlands or being in your stone circle. But actually, there's a boom area to find, I think, in druids and the sea and and what those relationships look like.
It's really interesting. I was at the Druid Gorset at the weekend and in Cornwall, and a few of us went down to the beach and Kraken something it's called, and a few crazy people went in for a swim. I stayed on shore and I held space. I'm very good at holding space for mad people who go into the sea. But we were all talking about how well we felt afterwards, just having been down there, breathing in the salt air, looking at the jagged rocks, the Cornish rocks and the cliffs, and how beautiful it was. And it just oh, and Andrew says there's a Touchstone article about Druids in the sea coming in a couple of months. Thank you, Andrew. And that's good to know. And I know somebody's going to do an account of the Gorsets, but just lovely being out there. And we're talking about how wonderful that was. So I like the sea in cold weather. I don't like to go there to the beach on a hot day. I don't like the sand. I hate burn, and I don't like swimming in the sea because it's sticky on my skin. I'm a freshwater, if I do go in, freshwater person. But I love walking by the sea and feeling the power and the waves and
yeah. And I know so many people that do that every, that go in. That I think I went in the sea once last year. This is a terrible confession, isn't it? I went in the sea once last year, and that was in Lancing in Sussex, which I don't know if that's what Andrew means, but I wrote something about that I think will be in touch.
That might be you. Okay.
But that's terrible when it's right there. I could so easily do it, but I know people who go every morning, whatever the weather, and that's the start of their day. And I'm very envious of that, but I don't think I'm enough of a morning person or enough of a temperature resistant person to do that. But it's good. And it's, it's curious in Plymouth. It's a city with a lot of kind of poverty, and it's actually a number of towns that were only sort of turned into a city in, I don't know, 1911 or something. It's still sort of, it's not that old in the grand scheme of things as a complete city in the way it is now. But there are people, I've worked with young people on theatre projects, and they might be in the north of the city and might never have gone to the sea, even though they're in the city here. So there've been some really interesting people who've been trying to do a lot to, rebuild that connection with the sea. There's a great organization called the Conscious Sisters, and they did a big project called The Gathering that was about trying to get people in Plymouth to connect with the sea by foraging and knitting and writing and storytelling and doing all kinds of different activities that build that relationship.
Wow. Because how big is Plymouth? In my head, it's small. When you call it a city, I thought, how big is it as a city compared to what?
I don't know off the top of my head. Let's have a look. Plymouth population, approximately 264,000.
Okay.
I don't know how that translates as...
that would be the population, I think, of Kilkenny County. But then if it's an urban nation. But it just interesting that the people are so close to the sea and haven't been called to it. That is just fascinating. And whether that's going back way back when you would have obviously had fisher people, in the villages or the small towns near the coast, and then others were country people, or maybe I don't know. And somehow that can get carried down.
But, and thinking of it as a place of work, right, in a way, rather than a place of recreation. I mean, we also there isn't sort of like a beach because it's this cove. There's like a tiny bit of beach that's not much, couple of lengths of this room I'm in maybe, but there's a lido. There used to be a pier, there's no longer a pier. There are rocks. You can kind of get to the sea, but it's not quite the same. I think if we had a big beach seafront,
the people would be going on Sundays or whatever it is on their days off. I get you. Yeah, your article will be going out in the summer issue. You're sorry. Andrew is the editor. Communicating here. Oh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So tell me about your background. I mean, you said you were born in Devon and moved all around, but your spiritual background.
So so mostly I grew up in Wiltshire, and my parents weren't particularly religious or sort of weren't particularly into that at all. They when they lived in North Devon, they ran the post office and shop in this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, and there was a Methodist church at one end and a Church of England church at the other, and they would go to events at both because they were the local shop and wanted to be part of the community. And then people would come in and go, I hear you've been to the Methodist harvest supper. What were you doing? So I think they were never sort of, they weren't sort of joiners of things like that. So I went to a Church of England primary school in the village that I grew up in. And I guess as a lot of Druids would say, it just didn't feel quite right. It didn't kind of fit. My dad was always kind of interested in that stuff, but he'd have books about, the archaeology of the Bible and what did or didn't work for whoever was writing that book. So there was always sort of a little bit of kind of critical eye around that. And then I think there's probably a couple of things. So being in Wiltshire, it was about 40 minutes maybe from Stonehenge, a little bit further maybe to Avebury. The town we were in, the hills had burial mounds on them. And in fact, I found out recently that the next village, two villages on from us, where I grew up, there was a Neolithic, possibly, I'm not sure if this is quite the right word really, but possibly shamanic figure burial, where someone was buried with gold and with bones and with things that seemed to suggest some kind of ceremonial role. The big hill outside the town had a story about how that was built by the devil because he was going to go and punish another town by pouring earth all over them because they were too good and saintly. But they decide to trick him. And this little old man at the back of the meeting goes, I'll go and sort this out. I know what to do. And he goes to the town near where I grew up and meets the devil. And the devil goes, I'm trying to find devises. They're all too pious there. I don't know if that's true, devises. I haven't been there for a very long time. But I really need to punish them. I've got this big spade of dirt to just chuck over them. And the little old man goes, oh, well, I've just come from devises, but I was a lad of 14 when I left. And now, as you can see, I'm grey of hair and long of beard. And the devil goes, it's much too far away then, and just dumps the dirt down to make what's called Clay Hill, just outside the town. So I guess what I'm saying is there was lots of that kind of.
That's a brilliant story.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? I like the cunning of that. Those are always good trickster stories. But yeah, so I guess there were lots of things around that might make one Druid curious, one way or another. And I think I probably had a bit of kind of spiritual tourism in sort of dipping into Buddhism or dipping into paganism and thinking about that, and then sort of for the story of it, going to Stonehenge as a teenager for summer solstice, and alongside all the madness that happens, especially pre-COVID, when some years there'd be 20,000 people having an acoustic rave in the middle of the stones. But there would always be these people in white robes, and they would do the call of peace, and they sort of call the directions, and they be talking about marking the sun coming up. And I don't know, there was something kind of appealing about it, and something that made sense. And that, I think, probably of lots of things, the wheel of the year in itself compared to other festivals that maybe felt a bit kind of alien or not connected, just felt like such a, I don't know, obvious thing to mark and to want to be in relationship with in some way. So yeah, so I think those things sort of drew me in. And I guess I would have maybe thought of myself as kind of vaguely pagan and sort of reading and dipping into bits and pieces and not quite knowing what to do with that kind of instinct, and not at that point feeling like there were people around that I could sort of, I'm sure there probably are more now in that part of the world. So that kind of curiosity kind of grew from there. And then inevitably at some point in probably getting books out, from the library or from wherever, or I'm sure some Googling, came across the order. And then spent a little while like reading books by people who were in OBOD or listening to Druidcast.
Yes.
I think the power and spread of that. And I think what was really good in that was that there was a balance of like these fireside chats and things. There was a balance of like talks and music and different kind of perspectives and what the order was up to, and then just different people who were druids and sort of building that into their lives in different ways. So then I was sort of more druid sympathetic maybe than just druid curious. And there was a point where I was like, oh, maybe I want to join. Maybe am I a joiner? I don't know if I'm a joiner. Is that me? And then I remember really clearly it was, I don't know what year this would have been, so this would be a bit further along. It was after the 50th had happened, the 50th anniversary summer gathering.
That was 2014.
2014, great. So there was there were talks from that were on the podcast. There was a brilliant little film of that with all these sort of smiling faces in it. And I don't know. At that point, something in my brain went, I've missed the 50th of this organization that feels like it's calling me in some way. I better try and make sure I'm in and around before the next anniversary, I think was sort of weirdly how my brain thought about it. And so at that point I sent off for the introductory pack. And then not long after that was gonna started the Bardic grade. And then that sort of coincided with them moving to Plymouth, because my other half got a job here, and I thought I can be a self-employed, unemployed theatre person anywhere in the country. Let's see what Plymouth is like. And really quickly I went, there's some druids in Plymouth. And I think a couple of weeks after moving in here, I found there was like a permaculture community garden project at the top of my road in the house we were renting, and I joined that, and I emailed the local druids sort of going, I don't really know what this is going to be like, and I don't drive, so I'm a slave to public transport, which is never good for getting to druid locations. But a very nice a person also called John. John, if you're out there somewhere, I haven't seen you for years and years, I hope you're doing well. Came and picked me up in his little car, and I sort of went, I'm getting into a car with a druid and I'm going to go to a stone circle somewhere with a druid. This is exciting. This is weird. And had a beautiful, I think it must have been Beltane ritual with like 6 people maybe in that little quartzy stone circle. And as everybody says, kind of went, I get this. This is This is doing something, and is also sort of flexible enough for me to work out exactly what I think without, I think I definitely still had a kick of well, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
You can't mean that, or you can't know that that's certainly true. That was all sort of the religion of my upbringing. And here I am still. Yeah.
And are you in the South Devon Grove, or are you on your own? Or are you?
I'm so South Devon Grove. I know a little bit. Hello, lovely South Devon Grovers. But I can't get to those bits of Dartmoor under my own steam power.
Okay.
So ironically, I see them most often at the summer gathering in Glastonbury, which is mad given how close I am. So yeah, there's a little. They're not a seed group with the order, a little group, the Druid Order of Tamaris, here in Plymouth, who sort of have a few Cornish members and a few Plymouth members, and sort of meet up just over the border to do bits and pieces, which is great.
Oh, wonderful. Brilliant. So now you, in your day job, you are a playwright and you are a theatre director. And you teach theatre studies, or you did at university?
So I teach theatre and in different ways. Inevitably with those jobs, I don't actually earn most of my money, sadly, from playwriting and directing, although I'm lucky that I do get paid to do those things sometimes. And then I do I teach at the university here, teaching on the acting and drama courses, and do other kind of workshops and things. Some of it in that kind of theatre creative writing world, some of it in the kind of well-being kind of facilitation work, which is also good to be doing. But yeah, as best I can, I try and make theatre happen, and have done that for a long time. And I am lucky because, touch wood, most of what I do for employment at the moment is connected to that, if not explicitly, just being paid to sit here and write plays, which would also be very nice.
Ah, beautiful. So where do you get your imas from, or your awen from, your inspiration for your writing?
What a good question. Do I know how that really works? Yeah, I don't know. Probably from a lot of places. So I think as I've gotten older, I think, as is often the case when you're trying to be an artist, I think a lot of originally I'm like kind of imitating people that I like, or doing something that I think people will vaguely want. And that's meant that maybe in the past things have been a little bit, more, I don't know, what I've written has been more kind of, I don't know, traditional isn't the right word, but more kind of like standard. Maybe is set in a city I've never lived in because I grew up in the West Country, or maybe doesn't have, characters who are the same as me very much. And what's happened increasingly in my writing, I think, as I've really been able to be open to what Arwen or Imbas sort of, I was going to say, wants me to write about. It's not quite that transactional. I think it's more, there's more give and take to it than that. But I've sort of allowed myself to let those other things that I'm interested in kind of bleed into the plays. And so there are things that I want to write about. I write a lot in my work about, here's a topic for 2025, how we know things are true. Which is a big question, and one that I keep sort of writing about, with a bit of a sort of a balance, in that you can have stories that you're telling yourself that aren't true, that you need to learn aren't true. And sometimes there are stories that might be true or might not be true, but can still be helpful, even though it's ambiguous whether they're true or not.
Because I don't know, is there a difference between a story that contains truth or a true story? And that stories contain truths, but not necessarily facts. And that's what's really, really important. And the thing, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I'm talking about stories that's what their purpose is. It's not for malice or anything else. That getting stuck in facts can be very dry, and but weaving the magic of truths or universal truths that come into a story, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, and I think there's been, and quite rightly in some ways, there's been a real fashion, particularly in theatre, for true stories. I'm going to tell you the true story of the thing that happened to me, or the true story of this, and that's great and useful, and we need to hear, because often they're stories that we don't otherwise get to hear. But I think sometimes that is sort of mistaken as somehow being more true, maybe, than a good fictional student. So my yet to be produced play about men having a midlife crisis and maybe wanting to turn into wolves and run out onto the moor is, I think, in some way more true about what some of that experience might be for people in my generation of my age than if I just went, oh, it's hard sometimes being a person, isn't it? So I think that's always,
because I think, that notion of, the middle-aged man turning himself into shape-shifting into a wolf. Andrew Anderson wants to see the play, by the way.
great.
That play.
I'm looking for investors, Andrew. Let's talk.
He can sort that. But it's really, really interesting when you use that. People can hear that. If they relate to it, they resonate. I know exactly what that feels like. So often I want to become a wolf and head off into the moors, rather than I'm miserable and I have mental health problems and I've been diagnosed with blah, 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 whatever. So like, yeah. That narrative is so common. Everybody now has a diagnosis with something.
Yeah.
And they all talk about my mental health. This is bad for it. It's good for it, blah, blah, blah. Where you go and you weave a story in there and you're weaving in magic. And that's the bit that people can get. And that's the hook. And I mean, hook in the best possible, because actually you're speaking to the person really, really deep down. And they can get out of themselves. They can stand outside and enter the story without being worn down by whatever the misery is or the issue is. But they can go in there and enter that place. Yeah. And I think it's a great place to find certain kinds of resolution. That may not be your intention is just to tell your story, because it's going to be your story.
Yeah.
But you find that people can enter that story and come out with some kind of resolution.
And I think kind of in the way that we know with those stories, that I think that stuff can get through all of this thinking and being in your head stuff that we do all the time, especially in this culture now. Those images and things are what can really get to us and get to us here. And I think sort of bringing it back to where the sort of the Arwen or the Imbas comes from, I think I've learned to trust that when an image comes, and I know that's part of the play, but I go, how the hell is him maybe being a wolf and then maybe being a hare that they discover part of this story? Or I wrote a play for Plymouth University a few years ago that was about, I guess, like paranoia, how a community can suddenly become really paranoid. And as I was writing that, really clearly in my head, there was like, and there's a scene where the stage is full of foxes and they're dancing. It's like a fox rave. And the rest of the play was very like husband and wife talking in this scene about the problem that's going on, and another scene of two young gay characters who are maybe going to get together. And I was like, how is a fox rave going to fit into this play? And I think if I didn't trust sometimes that, those things come from somewhere.
And I take it did.
Yeah, and was beautiful and mad. I'm really interested in, plays are for the most part about human beings and human behavior, but I'm really interested in how non-human people can really be part of those stories and not just scenery to them. So finding ways to do that, I think, is something that I keep coming back to, even if it's in not as foregrounded or in your face as a fox rave might be.
Well, foxes trot. They've been doing it in ballrooms for a long, long time. And it's I mean, stories of shape-shifting, they're there in so many traditions. And why not bring them into modern plays, or, for a modern, what would you call it? Sophisticated is the wrong word, because I don't know what sophisticated really means. But to have that, Nimi said, my fox had a party in our lawn recently. They had a brilliant night. Brilliant.
They are. There is something about, like, if foxes were going to organise a party, it would be, I think, a really dirty rave. I don't think it would be, I don't think it would be a tea party on the lawn.
Brilliant. So, and she says, they ate the leaves from our hellebore, which I thought were toxic. They are toxic. Hellebores are, but maybe they're not toxic to foxes. If you saw them again, they're probably still okay. But then foxes would know not to eat it, wouldn't they?
You would think. I don't know. Hopefully they're all right.
So, you have poetry, because I heard you reciting your poetry at the open mic at the summer gathering, and then you were reciting it at the winter gathering, the Eisteddfod. So would you like to share some of your poetry? And yes. I know you're also a storyteller, so we're going to have a story as well, aren't we?
Yes. When the moment feels right, I'll do something local and story based. I'll read a few bits. And again, here's my bit of encouragement to other druids. I've been to a reasonable number of summer gatherings now, maybe over the last 7 or 8 years, probably. I've been to a fair few. And I've been writing things, and I'm touring a theatre show at the moment. And it never sort of occurred to me to share any of that in the context of those, so when the open mic thing happened, it was great to just be able to go, okay, maybe I will. I'll share a couple of things and see how it goes. And then it went well enough, hopefully, to then do the summer gathering. But it is weird that for so long I was like, oh no, I won't share any writing. I won't do anything. No, I'll sit here. So don't do that, druids. Go for it. It then seems silly afterwards once you've.
Because that really surprises me, because you're a brilliant performer of your poetry. I mean, not all poets read their poetry very well. My husband was a poet and he was terrible. I said, let me do it, because you're not going to do it justice. Some people are not really good. You are. You're excellent. Ricky says we need the Mothman poem. I don't know if you have it to hand.
Let's see how we go. I have it here. We'll see if that's a poem that can divide a room. So maybe we'll warm up to not because there's anything. It's very slightly rude, I think. I don't think it's that.
Really, Ricky is not at all controversial ever. So
no. Very picture of respectability. Yeah, let's see if the energy gets us there or not. Can we? Is swearing allowed on Fireside Chat, Eimear? I don't.
There's
not.
This isn't radio. This is like a podcast. So, and anything goes on those, on anything like that. It's
We'll see.
Pat Booker is very surprised at their own words. But
who'd have thought it? Fab. Okay, well, we'll do a couple of. This is nice actually, because I can do some of the more druidy weird stuff, which sort of sits amongst other things. I'll do a bit of shameless promotion as well. I don't know if people have seen or have been reading Homecoming, the journal that Aurochs Press are doing, which is about animism, the Journal of New Animist Writing.
Are you got something in there?
There have been 4 so far. I've been lucky to have a couple of poems in the last 2.
That's a journal. Okay, what's it called? Journal of?
Homecoming, the Journal of New Animist Writing that Jack Wolfe is the editor of, and there's lots of O-bodies in here, as you would hope and
Jack Wolfe
expect. There's an Andrew Anderson in the contents page of.
Imagine.
There's Kerry, I think, is in this one. Gordon McClellan, who's given talks and things.
Yes.
a few, lots of people. It's great. It's sort of articles and stories and poetry. They're lush. I don't make any money out of it. I'm just promoting because I think it's cool. I think it's worth.
You're just going to suffer for your art. That's good. You're a real artist.
Yeah,
just look at what Andrew has done. He's broken up the word druids.
I think that has to be a new circle on the hearth, doesn't it? I dread to think what the moderating of that will be like. But I think that's
lovely.
I think that's something we have to work for. So I'm going to have to tack into serious poet mode now. So I'll change gear. But so the theme of this one was sort of nice and open druid topic, nature. So this is called Back to Nature. I don't want to get back to nature or hug a tree. I want to slip wordlessly between the folds of its rough bark and circle the rings around its hearthwood. I want to grow lightning bolt branches and feel the sun on my crown. Stretch my fingers into its leaves and breathe from them. Plunge my feet between its roots and drink from ancient aquifers. Let my nervous system turn mycelian and spread out in an underworld of soil and silence. I want to lose myself in its slow time and sun-blessed stretching. Count time in temperature and light. Feel my thoughts turn to chlorophyll, my blood to thick sap, and feel my own skin twist and harden as I sense the gentle drop of a robin on my arm.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
So that's one.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm just waiting for some responses. I love that. What volume is it in?
That's in volume 4.
Okay. And Liz Hill says, Eimear's right. You are amazing at reading your poetry. That is true.
Oh,
absolutely. Oh, gorgeous poem. What a wonderful poem. Thank you. Lovely. Tree time. Beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Nice. I should have planned this out a little bit more, shouldn't I? Here we go. Well, I tell you what, I'll do a little really druidy one that I did at the winter gathering to nudge us towards the rude druids. So this is called Dirty Druid. I got dirt on my gwers, and I couldn't feel worse. And my robe, it got wetter, but what could be better than to be a trend setter with mud on my cloak after that Beltane soak, like a real druid bloke. For when Bridget gets flirty, just about Gwersay 30, to be a good druid, you've got to get dirty.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Wonderful.
Very silly, but inspired by true events.
Yes.
It's hard to keep your reading materials clean as a druid if you're out in the field. Let's do. Maybe we'll do two more. So maybe I'll do. It feels like I should do something local.
Okay.
Do a bit of, and since we've spoken about the sea and the relationship to water, here this is a slightly longer one, but it's there's lots of druidry in it. So this is called In the Blue. I'm going to in a moment mention Devil's Point, which is a bit of Plymouth with a lot of folkloric history. Maybe there were sea witches there. Maybe problematic Plymouth sailors summoned the devil there to save us from the Spanish, etc., etc. That's why the devil's going to show up so quickly in this. Whenever I'm sad and lonely, I stand on the rocks at Devil's Point and I call out to the sound in sea sounds and witchy water words which evaporate on my tongue and fill the misty morning air. Those words flosh and froth around me, gurgle and gush as they meet the blue. They foam and frith amongst the waves, where rivers kiss the sea and sensuously spiral. These waters ran here when the ice melted and split the rocks, when rhinoceroses watered themselves by the cat-down roundabout, when giants fought on the shore like Barbican drunks. So they know a thing or two about heartbreak, about separation, how things rise, then fall, then rise again. So I go to them, humble and small against the aching azure, and pour out my heart and catch the rising stories that spray from the surface in reply. Have you heard? When her father tried to trap her freedom in the earth, Tamara turned to tears and cried herself into a mighty river, forcing an escape route to the coast. They say a magician bewitched a storm and rode it, white foam, horse, mane, and all, until it filled Plymouth's thirsty silver cup, that sea witches stirred the depths and churned waters high and low against enemy ships, that pilchards broke the Civil War siege of the city and propelled themselves into the Barbican to feed the hungry. And on this damp evening, I believe them all.
That's wonderful.
I love that run of the folklore, and how, I don't know, it tells you something about this place, and there's always more to kind of.
And I just love, I believe them all. And I think there's something about, and that's the truth. The truth in the mythologies, the truth in the telling, I think it's just wonderful. And somebody early on in the feed said, were some of the Spanish Armada defeated at Plymouth?
Yes. So Drake was, so say, stood on the hoe, playing bowls, which, I don't know, the hose sort of goes like that down to the sea. It seems unlikely he'd be playing bowls. Maybe he was drinking bowls of cider. That's the other story. Again, I just love these things where like the details could change to many, many things. Maybe he went down to the sea witches at Devil's Point and they helped raise a storm. So Drake and the Spanish Armada is a story here. And again, there's so much kind of interesting magical kind of mythology around him. On Dartmoor, you've got Wistman's Wood, where the Wild Hunt rides out, and sometimes that's Drake, but sometimes that's a green man figure, sometimes that's the devil. There's a lot of rich kind of stuff like that around.
And then Tamara becomes the river, and is that where you get your name from, that Druid order?
Yeah, I might. That might be the thing that if we do a story, that might be. Maybe I'll do that story because that.
Please do. Yes, that would be lovely too.
Might be nice around. Or, my flavor of it. I worry now that this will taint my reputation. But if there's been a request, maybe I should do Mothman, and then we'll finish.
Nobody knows where you live, so you're okay.
Big city. It's a big city. One in 2060 something. If this goes on, it's fine. I'm going to stop worrying about it, and we'll live in the moment. So, readers, listeners at home, yes. You might or might not be familiar with the mythic creature known as Mothman, who, as the name suggests, is a moth the size of a man with bright red eyes, who some would say bothered people in the around Point Pleasant in America, and was sort of, there were a number of sightings of this strange creature, and then not long after lots of those sightings, a bridge collapsed, and people were like, "Was that a warning of the bridge about to collapse?" Yeah, now there's a festival in that town.
Wow.
I really love the way that towns, small towns somewhere can find that thing that's their unique local sort of gift. So the town I grew up near, Warminster, 60 years ago this year, had a big like UFO flap. It became the UFO sighting capital of Europe for a couple of years. Sounds, light in the sky. Yeah, amazing stuff. I'm trying to maybe organize some things for the 60th anniversary of that, because I don't think anyone else is. And I feel like, true or not, these things should be played with in some way. But yeah, so Mothman is now, there's a statue. They do a festival. Build-A-Bear have brought out a Mothman toy this year. It's all, yeah, he's become a bit of a figure. Here's my very good artist rendition. You can see why I do theatre and writing and not anything else.
Well, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the chat for your poem.
It's overhyped now. But I haven't really been reading. I've written poetry for a little while, but I haven't really done kind of performing poetry until the last few years. And the first time I did an open mic, I had 3, I think quite good, but really depressing, dry poems. And then some people after me came up with some poems that were really silly and dirty and enjoyable. And I was like, I don't have anything like that. So Mothman became the start for that. Mothman's also become a bit of there's a strange kind of adopting of creatures like Mothman by the LGBTQ community, of which I'm part. So yeah, we claim Mothman for whatever reason, I don't know. And that's sort of what this is about. It's only mildly naughty. I'll move through the 2 F-bombs very swiftly.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're adults, and it's...
This is called Hey Mothman, Are We About to Kiss? A shadow on the road ahead, a mighty pair of wings, the creeping sense of paradoom that each fresh wing flap brings, but nothing could prepare me for your beady, bright red eyes, or all the things stirred up in me by your throbbing, cryptid thighs. You West Virginia creature with a span that's hard to miss. Hey, Mothman, are we about to kiss? A statue in cursed Point Pleasant accentuates your bum. Let me make a Mothman prophecy. It's certain we'll both come when I spot you flying in the air or landing on that ridge where you know that I'll go down for you even faster than that bridge. It's a shame you're only summoned before something goes amiss. Hey, Mothman, are we about to kiss? The Yeti's fine as daddies go. The Chupacabra stinks. Without sonar, you never know what the Loch Ness Monster thinks. I can't cruise with Bigfoot in the woods until the day goes dark, or take the beast of Exmoor for a walk around the park, and it's hard to woo Cthulhu when he dwells in the abyss. So, Mothman, are we about to kiss? We have a special connection, a bond like you and Keel, and fuck those lousy skeptics who insist that you're not real, because even my ex, the Babadook, could lift his hat and see what most ultra-terrestrials are certain to agree. An encounter with you would be such weird, orgasmic luck. Hey, Mothman, are we about to... So silly.
Brilliant.
So silly. Forgive me.
Brilliant. Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Ah, wonderful. Oh, that's great.
Mm.
So, what is? I'm going to get back to you now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lovely. You get an applaud here. Excellent, wild
Thank you.
applause.
I can't
Lots
see
of
the numbers, so I can't see if anyone's left. That's good.
no, yay! Nobody's left since you started.
Great, good, lovely.
Brilliant,
Oh,
love
Karen,
it.
you went UFO spotting in Warminster.
That's right.
I'd love to know more about that. Tell me more in a comment down here. That'd be great. Thank you.
Great, and we can come back to that. So put in your comment. Super, clever poem, hilarious, fun. Thanks. Brings chuckles. So I don't think there's anyone who's offended that haven't put anything in the chat. We're grown-ups here.
Yes.
So this may have been the most reckless thing you've ever done. So what's the second most reckless thing in your life?
Oh goodness. The most reckless thing I have done. Do you know what's funny is that I had a couple of possible things for this when I knew this question was coming, and then earlier today my brain went, "Oh, actually, here's a fun story." Can I remember what that new fun story was now in this moment? No, I can't. Yeah, no. Maybe that'll come back round if I keep thinking about it. So I guess this is sort of maybe this is helpful in terms of druidry. I used to do campaign work for Greenpeace back in the day, and was part of a few actions going and gently interfering with people who might be bad for the environment in one way or another, and had some fun doing that, and did some things that now looking back seem slightly bonkers. I was dressed as a polar bear, chained to another polar bear in the sort of marble lobby of a Scottish oil company, and then had to go to the loo. So ended up using the toilets in this Scottish oil company's offices, and they were lush, and they had plants in them and mahogany and marble, and were very luxurious. And then I went back to being dressed as a polar bear. So I guess a number of things in that were the case. We did some blocked Volkswagen's head offices with Volkswagen Beetles that then had their tires locked down. And when the Olympics was happening, there was a big. This is the tricky thing about being someone who does some environmental campaigning. All the things you've sort of fought before and maybe won a campaign on, you then have to fight again. So Shell were going to drill in the Arctic. There have been various levels of protection for that over the years since. I don't know, directly related to anything I worked on necessarily, but that felt like a win. Now that's back up in the air. Third runway at Heathrow, spent some time camping there to suggest that was maybe not great. Now that's back on the run. But during that kind of period of my life, there were lots of great little missions for Greenpeace, and moments of going, "Ooh, have I thought about exactly what I'm doing here in this moment?" And mostly was sort of fine and good. Was arrested once for the Shell thing, and had and was very well looked after by Greenpeace during all of that. But have had to in jobs since explain, if you do my background check before I come and teach here, you're going to see that it looks like I've damaged a petrol station, but actually I put a bike lock around a petrol pump, and Shell weren't very keen on that, but it's going to look more serious than it is. So I sort of and I do that side of things not at all now really, but do other kinds of support for environmental campaigning, and try and bring some of the sort of the theatre and art stuff into that work, which again have sort of always been separate. And I think again this is another thing of being older, that actually I'm going, well, actually that sort of stuff and the druidry and the storytelling are actually the same thing. They're the same. Eventually, they're the same river, and those things are kind of wandering together now. But I am baffled at my, particularly in my 20s, I guess, my recklessness to just go, yeah, okay, I'll go and do that.
Brilliant. So, because I'm always interested, there's a time in various people's lives. I mean, I was very compliant in my early 20s. I'm now more of a rebel than I was when I was younger. But, so many when they're young people will protest and do all of that. And then you come to a state in your life and say, there's another way of being an activist. So I'm just interested, can you be a little bit more specific, or, how, like when you said you're doing it in a different way now, how do you do it now? How do you make your views known, or how do you protest it if that's what you do?
Yeah. So some of that is in some of the writing. So some of the, I've been writing a play as part of a sort of supported scheme for a company called Payne's Plough. And there are Payne's Plough, and there are 60 or 70 of us, I think, in the country who are sort of being mentored to write a play at the moment, sort of across a few different theatres. And the play I'm writing for that is the sort of second of two plays which are about how you what's the best way of putting it? I guess in a way like how you keep going as an activist and campaigner. So one that I've written before is about kind of environmental activist burnout, which I think I've probably had, and other people have. And the current one is about like thinking about how you respond to the rise of the far right, of fascism, and what that means. I was originally had a little commission for Theatre Royal that was to write something about local history, and it didn't happen in the end because COVID happened, and lots of things went away. But discovered then how popular fascism was in Devon in the 1930s. And in fact, behind where the theatre building is now, they had a building and a library and a parade ground, and like Plymouth was a sort of a target city. But all the conversations that we have today about, can you just argue people round from that? Do you have to disrupt them if they're trying to meet, or do you have to let them speak and see what that, all of those kind of arguments happened in the 30s, and some kind of, conclusions were made. Lots of those battles were won one way or the other. And now we're sort of in a time where lots of those questions are sort of coming back up again. So I think there's one sense in which some of my work is trying to talk about those things and go, this is tough, right? Like it's, there are the questions about what's best to do, but we don't very often talk about like the emotional impact of any of that stuff, and what and how you ground yourself to really bring it back to Druidry. And I think a big part of what does that for me is this path and that sense of building relationship. So I guess there's that version of it in some of the artistic stuff that I'm trying to do. We've done like low carbon little touring plays about climate change in Devon and things. I've just started doing a little bit of work supporting Sacred Earth activism, who do kind of spiritual and ceremonial responses to environmental campaigning, and are about to do some really interesting work on getting recognized status for sacred landscapes, initially in the UK, but also further afield, the Sacred Land Charter. So I'm working with them a little bit. As with all these things, I feel like I'm not doing nearly enough. But it's, I think what's good is, with everything being the way it is, there's lots of good stuff to be doing. You don't have to do one particular kind of, campaigning. There's a time when I've sort of felt that I was able to chain myself to things for a bit, and I'm finding a different, other ways to do that right now.
Yes, I had a conversation with Jonathan from the Sacred Land Charter recently.
Cool.
So it's interesting to know that you're also involved in that.
Very, very new. Like the last couple of months, I've been starting to help out a little bit.
Darren has a question. Would earnestly trying to live your values be too quiet to be considered a protest? If your light models the problem and the many solutions, is that a good enough version of evangelism?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm very much of the "we need it all" school of thought, and I think there used to be a great slogan, maybe is the wrong word, in the kind of the what at the time was called the anti-globalization movement, but I guess was more of a like anti-capitalist kind of movement in the 90s, that was that I think originally came out of the kind of indigenous groups in Mexico. That was this is about one no and many yeses. So that's the thing that we don't think works anymore. And what we want is not to say, and now it has to be this, but what we want are lots of different alternatives to that. And I think we need to know what those are, and we need to see what those are. And if, putting those values into practice, that's part of that, because people see that and know that. And that's, I think even there might be lots of conversations about the politics of Druidry. I think Obod does a really good job of sort of finding a place to hold its values, but not get caught up in the kind of the political back and forth. But a lot of things that I think are causing trouble in the world are about us being disconnected from the more than human world, and I think that's what Druids are for. I think that's what we're for in a host of different ways, to have that connection and, say to the natural world, hey, we're here and we're doing stuff, but also to help spread that, to do that reconnection, to do that re-enchantment, that I think is really important, because cold hard statistics don't do it. Cold hard statistics we've had for a very long time, and every year I go on a climate march where they say this is the last year because of this statistic that anything can be done, and it doesn't work. But stories and folklore and ritual do. I love a wassail. Went to a few wassails last year, including a new wassail in an orchard. There are now in Plymouth, which I think of as not being very kind of, I don't know, not very druidic per se. There are now, I think there were 10 this year, wassails, lots of which are new, large and small. There was one at the top of my road for the first time ever. So I was like, I get to do 2 this year. But what's really interesting going to those is that there were so many people who were like, I don't know what this is. I didn't know what it was. We just came along because we were curious, and we love it. What was there was that song, and you were pouring cider on the trees, and then we were talking to the trees, and people were and I think people want and need that stuff, but don't know what they want or need. And so to have, to whatever level, to have people demonstrating that out in the world, people find each other and find it that way.
I think what they need, yes, and it's through experience. It's not through, like you say, statistics. I'm going to wash it with anybody, but it's actually go to wassail. Can you explain to Ruth, who's in Wexford, what a wassail is? Because we don't do it in Ireland.
Oh yes, so a wassail is a folk tradition. How old it is disputed, but the idea in yes, thank you, correct pronunciation and spellers, because I wouldn't have been able to spell that easily to type into the chat. Thank you. Is a folk tradition that is about connection with the apple trees normally in January. It's normally somewhere sort of 12th night connected, and people do slightly different versions, but the idea is that you're thanking and waking the apple trees up, ready for the year ahead. And so you do that in a few different ways. Normally, there's a lot of noise making, drumming, banging pots and pans. I think in the past, firing guns, and that's scaring the evil spirits from the orchards. Whatever we might think of what that means or doesn't mean. Singing to the trees, pouring cider on their branches and on their roots to sort of give back the gifts they've given in the previous year. Putting burnt toast, in and amongst the branches. So it's this process of sort of nature connection, right? Of finding a way to be in relationship with the apples that are, particularly in this part of the country, I guess, a mainstay of how people have sort of survived and lived together. And they're great, and they sort of have that standard pattern. Lots of places have their own individual wassail songs. Some, like quite a lot now, are becoming, I think, more pagan, because people kind of dig that. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a little bit more like small C conservative tradition kind of vibe. You might have people in kind of Morris dress, but I think what's good about it is that there is a real sense of the ceremony of it, and there's a real sense that there's magic happening there. But it's also kind of a bit of a party, and there's cider, and there's drumming and singing. So it's both, and ceremony should be joyous, right? That's
what is it? Reverence and mirth. It's interesting because ritual is a glue that can draw people together. Mm-hmm. And Liz says, heard a physician specializing in hypnotherapy say that people's estimates of the probability of something happening is related to their ability to visualize it, the value of story for goodwill. And I would work as a psychologist. We have this thing, you ask a miracle question. You get people to say, so you have a problem, whatever it is, you go to bed, and in the night a miracle happens and your problem's gone. Now, nobody has told you the miracle has happened. So what would be different as soon as you wake up? So you're getting them to describe it minute by minute, and what then, and what then. And what they're doing is visualizing a different possibility, a different scenario. And that goes a long way towards giving them, because people say, I want to be happy. Well, how would you know? I don't know. I'm just not happy. I'm stuck in this miserable place, or whatever the thing that's going on. I can't see any other way. And by getting them in a sideways way for them to visualize their own scene, I think is really, really powerful. And stories also, because it takes you out of there, out of yourself, out of your own way, into other possibilities, other scenarios. That is beautiful.
Yeah. And like my belief and experience is that people are hungry for it. They just don't know quite what it is they're hungry for until they see it and encounter it.
I have often felt that. I said, I know when I find it. It's that I've, because it's also like, as I say, when you meet somebody that you're going to, let's say, a lifelong partner.
Yeah.
People say, well, you should visualize the person now, and they're tall, and they're this, and they've got this. They need to be really specific, and it's like, well, I'm not so sure, but you'll know it when they're the right one, and that's the thing, because there are, you may decide, well, I want these characteristics in a life partner, but then you meet somebody who doesn't have those, but they are the right one, and that's what's visualizing helps you, but it's you don't need to be locked into a specific, but and I think stories of place. There's a member who's doing a PhD, psychologist in Ireland. She's Irish. Her thing is around getting people in power to tell stories about a place they liked as a child. Like, where did you like to play? So people say, well, we used to go up to the woods, or there was a field with a fallen down tree, or we used to go to a pond or beside, and describe it. And what was it like? And there's something around the process of remembering and visualizing in their own mind that scene from the past and the fun they had, that somehow it brings out a greater empathy for the landscape, and for relationship and connection through conversation. And I find that is fascinating, because it's all about connection. And I suppose in the modern world, there's so much fragmentation and isolation. Communities are great as long as they're nice, but communities can be very stifling as well. As a lot of our members who have left other communities and joined OBOD have found, and then they come to OBOD and they find it because there's so much openness. And like, we share values, we don't share beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And often we say we have a goal, maybe my goal in life was to make the world a better place. Now, I think most of us would like to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Where we might fall down in is that we don't agree on how we will do it. So our goals might be the same, but our modes, our methods are different. And often people fall down and fight, break apart because of different methods rather than actually coming back to what are we here for?
Yeah.
What is it that we want to achieve? And
Yeah, no, I think that kind of gets to some of the heart of it. And I think that the thing about childhood stories is interesting. I grew up in a little village. I was lucky to have a childhood where I could wander off up a hill or into a wood nearby.
Unsupervised, yes.
And then I became a teenager, and I spent a lot of my teenage years going, oh, there's nothing to do here. Oh, even the nearest town is, this far away, or the nearest city, should have been Bath or Salisbury, is X distance away. And they're not big cities really, and being young and gay growing up, going like, well, as far as I know, I might be the only person here. I mean, when I heard maybe it's 1 in 10 statistic for gay people, I'd be in a room and be like, oh my God, there are 10 people in this room. How exciting. There might be someone and then I'd sort of look around and go, oh no, I'm the 1 in 10. Okay, well, because of all of that, I was like, okay, I want to go somewhere. I want to, and I ended up going to Exeter for university, which is not a big raving industrial heartland, but was bigger and different. But it's been really interesting sort of after my time of being kind of away for studying and living in other places and going back. I don't even know that I can articulate it. I have a connection to that place where I grew up and that knew me as I was growing up. That is different. I see those hills in that bit of Wiltshire, and they, I don't know, they speak to me. There's a connection there. That, I've been here 14 years. There's lots of places here that I love, that I think I'm building relationship with, but there is something about that place that knew me when I was a child, and that I knew when I was a child, that I have a different, and I didn't know it. I didn't know it or feel that when I was there. I had to go away and come back and go, oh, hello, there's something about this. Yeah. I think that's, I'd like to know more about that and the work that they're doing. But and again, that, that thing about knowing where we want to go and being open about how we get there is absolutely the thing. And one of the things I really love about OBOD and about Druidry, I love being in a circle and going through whatever part of the ritual and going, well, for me, that's at more of the kind of maybe animisty end, and I'm kind of open to some of that, and I can be next to someone who's a staunch Norse gods believer and relator, and someone who might have a completely different kind of cosmology in their head that's working, but none of that matters, because there is that moment of coming together in that intent for relationship.
Mm-hmm.
A relationship with all the beings who are around us, whatever they might be or whatever form they take. I
mean, it always fascinates me how in certain quarters relationship isn't recognized as something important. Like from the moment we're born, we have a relationship with our mother or whoever the caretaker is, and that is crucial. And I suppose we spend the rest of our life trying to create another one like that, finding one. And if there is no relationship, wherever, either with people, no relationship with your family, your work colleagues, or the land, nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's all about relationship and connection.
Yeah.
being able to, these are not soft skills. I taught in a development study center for 27 years. I taught relationship skills, and it was considered these are the soft things. And I consulted to multinational organizations, and they say, oh, this is the soft stuff. And I'm going, and that would be the first to get cut, stick with the engineering and all the politics and the economics and all that stuff. It's like, but this other stuff, we all know how to talk. It's like, no, you don't actually.
No, I've been doing some kind of circle work at the moment, which at its base level is about communication and creating a space where people can be heard and can say what they mean to say, I guess. And that's come from lots of that's become kind of like a way of holding space with people in lots of different sectors. A lot of it modeled from kind of First Nations American kind of council practice. And I'm saying that deliberately because sometimes that kind of gets like left out of the sort of the lineage of it. But I've been doing that with different groups, including people who sort of work in care and support work. And in a way, it's incredibly simple because it's about being in a space where everyone is coming together in a circle at an equal footing. And it's about slowing down, putting aside all the kind of the hectic, productive energy of day-to-day life. And, there'll be a question or a theme, and it'll be, okay, we're going to talk about how you feel. How are things going at work? How could things be different? And as you say, people assume those are soft skills or easy things. Like everyone knows how to sit and talk about what's going on.
They are not.
It's not that easy. It's one of the hardest things, and it takes work, and it takes practice, and it takes kindness. And there are so many things in the way our culture works at the moment that kind of fight against being able to do that. And there's a lot going on in the world. We've been through a lot in the last decade, COVID included, without really talking about what that means. And it's hard, and it's so important. And there are so many people who don't feel listened to, who need that relationship, but don't, like the space to even start that is absent. And I think that's, again, in my sort of trying to weave things together, there's something about that space of being together in circle and communicating that I love and really value. There's something in being a druid and gathering in circle for ritual and ceremony. If in any drama workshop or theatre rehearsal room, I'm going to make you stand in a circle, and we're going to communicate and think about relating to each other. And so I think there's lots of things that I do happen in that space of circle, where really, I remember somebody was doing an exercise once about why do you do theatre? And they were sort of, I brought them in to work with some people when I was working in a theatre, and I sort of went, I'll just see how this workshop's going. And then that question came round to me, and I was like, I wasn't really participating here. And sort of thought about all these highfalutin things about the importance of story and whatever. And then sort of went, oh no, I do it to not be alone. I do it because when I was growing up, it was a space where I could be with other people and not feel self-conscious and be good at something. And like, I do it to not be alone. Even though I do the writing bit, which is sometimes the lonely bit, but eventually you get in a room with other people, hopefully. But yeah, lots of these things I think are.
It's about connection.
Yeah.
It's funny, Ricky says if only these soft skills were included in the mandatory training in NHS, he said, how come annually that I have to prove I know how to wash my hands, but never have to be assessed on communication or connection? And I know Ricky was a guest, how many years ago now? 4 years ago, maybe? And, he was talking about working in the lighthouse during, at the height of the AIDS crisis, before treatment and all of that, and so many people were dying. And, so much of their work then was connecting with their patients in a loving, caring, warm way.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the world was, frightened of this. And then you had these carers actually recognizing these people as human beings, and reaching out and connecting. And
Mm.
power of touch, the power of soft words, the power of listening, so crucial. I mean, we have a listening circle in OBOD.
I've never been, but always I'm often working, but
It's the first Wednesday of the month, and it's just about listening. There's no ideology. There's nobody offering advice. It's not about healing you, but allowing somebody to speak for about 3 minutes and everybody else listens. And it's a strange thing because it's not a conversation. We're in little breakout rooms and people speak for whatever the prompt is. And anytime I go, I go every month, and I come away feeling much, much better.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to be talking about. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but just like, oh, here is a place where I can speak for a few moments and people are just listening and nobody's giving me advice.
Yeah.
There's no ideology, no politics, no nothing other than listening.
Listening intention, yeah.
How healing and magical that process is and how simple it is.
Yeah, so powerful. I used to work a lot doing youth theatre, which I don't sort of do so much now. But I remember running a drama group in a school, and we'd go and we'd do games, and maybe eventually we'd perform a little, 10-minute play at the end of a term or something with secondary school kids. But actually, like the first 15 minutes of the hour and a bit and the end 15 minutes, they'd tell us what they were up to and what they were doing and what they'd seen on TV and what they'd done. And, I can remember sort of being a very earnest young kind of practitioner and going, oh, well, we've got I think early on I'd been like, well, we've got the plan of what we're going to do. But I remember really clearly standing just in one of those moments of them coming over and telling me and Tash, who I was working with, and just having a real moment of clarity of going, oh God, I think we might be the only adults who are interested in what these kids want to tell us and listen and take them seriously. And that suddenly felt like a huge responsibility. But I was so struck by the sort of realization of going, yeah, we might be some of the few, particularly adults, who actually just I want to listen and want to hear what you say. And again, not maybe go, oh, are you right or wrong about that, or or impart any wisdom. I don't know what wisdom I have, but just to listen and be interested. And I think in teaching more and more as things have gone on, there's less time for that kind of relationship building and just chatting and whatever. That's all been kind of squeezed out because of the curriculum, and you have to recap what you did last time and what you're going to do this time and then do the lesson. Like there's no space to just go, hey, what's going on? How you feeling? What are you thinking about? Oh, okay, it's that crap song you've seen on Instagram or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what any of the content is particularly. There's a real thing about listening in our culture, I think. And
growing up, I had to listen to my parents and my elders, and very, very little space to be heard. And I had a point there and it's gone from me. And how important that is to have that time for. I remember there are 2 or 3 adults that stand out from my childhood. They weren't, people would come and visit, and they would listen to me. They would ask me how I was, and I still remember them. But there were very, very few. Certainly not my parents, not my teachers. But the odd person would come visiting, and then they would actually ask me questions about me and what I was doing, and they'd actually listen. They always stood out, and it's like, oh, they actually were nice to me as an adult. But the rest of the time, I wasn't heard. Because you were to be, what is it? You should be seen and not heard, or heard and not seen, whatever the hell is the one. And my voice wasn't important, and my opinion wasn't important. My parents' opinions were important because they were the wise ones. And I think it's just lovely that you have that space, grasping those sessions to allow these kids to speak.
And we could do a whole other tangent about how all of that, those areas even that there are within the curriculum that maybe could hold that in the arts are the things that are now being cut. But again, trying to boil things down to how we're where we are, people not feeling listened to.
That's what causes wars.
It's huge. Yeah, it's so much of what's happening in the world right now, and the sort of the way that people's anger is coming up. That anger comes from not feeling listened to.
That's right.
Not feeling
Absolutely.
valued. And there's no easy fix to that.
No.
Necessarily, but but I think it. Like you're saying, it needs that recognition that is a profound skill and a profound source of healing and a profound source of.
And a simple one, and it's free. And the thing about listening is you don't have to come up with any wisdom. Like if somebody's bereaved and you go to them, being with them, your presence, not your platitudes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, in times of grief, no words are of comfort, but your presence can be. And it's about being able to sit with somebody in their pain, with their tears, and not try and fix it. What a gift. Now, I think it's time for a story before we finish.
Cool. That sounds good to me. Cool. So I've sort of alluded to it a little bit already in the bit of poem earlier. I can't see right now because it's dark, but I can look through my window here from my desk and see the River Tamar, which is currently running down along that way and out to the Sound. And that sort of body of water, that natural kind of harbour, has a few different rivers flowing into it, including the Tavy and the Plym, hence Plymouth. So this is a story of how those rivers and that place came to be. A long, long time ago, when the earth was still young, and people sang to the moon, and the moon sang back, there was an earth spirit called Tamara, born of two earth spirit parents who lived deep in the dark earth of Dartmoor, what we today call Dartmoor. And these earth spirits lived deep amongst the stones and roots and earths and sands and fossils of the earth, and were very happy and content there. They were nourished and refreshed by the aquifers and the rainwater that finally seeped down into that soil, and warmed by that bright burning fire at the heart of the planet coming up, and the bright burning light of the sun coming down. And they felt they were in a place of perfect balance of everything that they would want. But as is often the case with children, the little world of roots and rocks and moles and grubs was not quite enough for Tamara. Tamara had some curiosity about what else might be out in the world. And so she would weave about. Sometimes she would stumble upon a badger set and work her way through that crazy maze and network of tunnels, sensing that maybe they were leading somewhere. Sometimes she could grab onto a tree root and follow its course until eventually she found that strange, bright place, the surface of the earth, and she would push herself up and out onto the moorland and feel that bright light and fire of the sun. And her already bubbling personality that had bubbled up out of the ground was only further enriched, bubbled, steamed in that light and that heat, and she would dance across the landscape of Dartmoor. She would dance in circles and spirals that some people say maybe were the first traces of the stone circles and pathways that are there now. And she loved the world of the surface, the sun, the birds, the trees, the plants, the ponies, the wolves, the cats, and they loved her. But whenever she would go back down into the earth to her parents would tell her they feared for her on the surface. It was too open, too full of creatures, too many places to hide, too many open vistas where there might be threat, and that she should stay where she belonged, deep in the earth. But as is often the case with young people, even if she nodded along when they told her that at the end of a long day, another day would come and she'd find the path of a mole up and wiggle her way back up to the surface and dance out on Dartmoor. And that kind of joy at living and dancing under the sun doesn't go unnoticed. And Tamara's joy and dancing was noticed by two giants. Devon at this time was a place of giants. There are two mighty giants who fought on the shores of Plymouth at the founding of that place, Gog and Magog. But these two giants were younger Dartmoor folk, Tavi and Torridge. And Tavi and Torridge had never seen anybody move and express joy in this way. They'd never heard anyone sing with such a bubbling, streaming, trickling voice before, and it was irresistible. And the three soon became fast friends. And these giants, who were used to the solidity and stillness of being a giant, began to move and spiral and twist and laugh and dance with Tamara. And this happened for many, many days, and they grew to love each other, the three of them. However, down in the earth, little Earth Sprite Dad, as sometimes is the case, was very cross. Wasn't being listened to. Very cross, very angry about that, very worried about what might happen. He'd heard terrible things about the giants of the surface. And so, in a rage, he follows up to the surface to bring Tamara back down where she belongs. And it's like his worst possible nightmare. There she is, doing a circle dance. Let's say she's doing the Macarena with these two giants. Then they're doing, what's that called? I'm showing some of my age.
YMCA.
Oh no, YMCA. Yeah, they're doing the YMCA. They're doing like a dream ballet sequence in the middle. It's like they're in Oklahoma. Maybe a bit of breakdancing, and it sends him into an absolute rage. He cannot believe how disobedient his daughter has been, and all of his fear and all of his anger bubbles and boils, and he loses control. And in a moment of that anger, he reaches out to curse his daughter, and their eyes meet. And there are different versions of what happened next. Some say, as his hand touched her shoulder, the curse he laid on her came to fruition. But maybe there are some who say, just before his hand could lay rest on her and lay whatever curse he had in mind, Tamara was able to avoid that fate. And whichever version of that moment you believe, as they were locked eye to eye, her father saw first one tear from Tamara, and then another and another, until soon there was water pouring down her face, and before he could tell what was happening, she turned to tears completely. And the water of that tears pooled down to the ground and then rushed off across the landscape, out and out, looking for some kind of escape, out to the sea. And when it met the coast, it found what's now the Plymouth Sound, and Tamara, trapped, restricted in the earth, finding that freedom of the moor, now flowed freely out to the sea with no restriction possible. And her father in that moment realized the seriousness of what had happened and sadly went back to his place in the earth. The two giants, meanwhile, are distraught. Their friend has gone. This river is now flowing across the landscape that wasn't there before. What is to be done? And so Tavi, the first of the giants, goes to his father, who also happens to be a sorcerer, a giant sorcerer, which some would say is the best kind of sorcerer. And when he tells his father what has happened, he tells his father of his love and that he wants to still be able to dance with Tamara. It's the only thing he wants. His sorcerer father says, "Son, is this truly the thing that you want?" He sees in his heart that it's true, and his father reaches out, and when he touches his son upon the shoulder, his son turns to waters, and those waters flow out to meet Tamara, and they flow side by side out to the sea together, meet in the Sound, and there, until this day, spiral and circle and dance together. Torridge, still standing on the moor, is distraught and confused. His grief is overwhelming. He can't even see the course of these waters around him. He doesn't know what to do. He too goes to an enchanter, though not one of his family, and explains to the enchanter what has happened. And the enchanter says, "I can help you out. I can help you flow out to meet your love." And the enchanter reaches out and touches his shoulder. But such is the level of grief that Torridge has, that when he collapses into the form of a river, he flows for a moment by the side of his two friends and then loses track of where they are and where he wants to be. And he turns off in a completely different direction and flows up to what is now the Bristol Channel and never meets those same waters. But if you stand on Plymouth Hoe, even if you're feeling a little sad and lonely, you can see those two waters, those two ancient streams of friendship meeting, curling, spiraling, and dancing still.
Oh, that's just beautiful. That is just a lovely story. Thank you.
Thank you.
But this has been such a lovely conversation, and
thank you.
Such a joy, and went on longer than I had intended.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was because it was so interesting. So thank you so much. So I will let you say goodnight to our viewers.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for spending some silly and some serious time with us. May you all go gently. The blessings of the moor and the sea from this part of the world to you wherever you are. And yeah, I hope in whatever place in Obod we find ourselves in a circle together at some point soon.
Brilliant. Well, there's lots of reaction to your story and your poetry, and a very interesting, inspiring, uplifting chat. So thank you very much, and lovely conversation. So thank you so much. I'll send you back to the green room, and I will just say goodbye and good night.
Bonsoir, bonsoir.
So thank you all for joining us. And Vanessa, this is your first time you've managed to connect. Brilliant. So thank you all for joining us this evening. And I'm glad you enjoyed our chat. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. I think that's in 2 weeks' time. Just let me check. Yes. No, it won't be 2. It'll be 4. Where are we now? The 13th. No, 2 weeks I'm going to visit my daughter. So it'll be 4 weeks' time, because I'm alternating my chats with our stories around the hearth for the order. So thank you all, and wish you all a blessed spring equinox wherever you're celebrating it, whether you're doing it in real or online or on your own. So in the meantime, have a good evening, a good afternoon, a good morning, or if you're watching a recording of this chat. In the meantime, be well, and the blessings of spring to you all. Iawa agus slán go fóill.